Hello, everyone. Tonight, find yourself a truly comfortable spot. It could be your familiar bed, a soft sofa, or simply somewhere quiet enough for your body to slowly unwind after a long day. Tonight, we will embark on a slightly strange journey, because this story isn't about famous kings or glorious battles, but about something much simpler, yet much more daunting. It is a question. If you woke up one morning in the world of prehistoric humans, could you survive even a single day? At first, it sounds easy. After all, our ancestors lived that way for tens of thousands of years. They hunted, gathered, built fires, slept in caves, and gazed up at the starry sky. But the problem lies here. They were used to that world from the moment they were born. We are not. Just imagine one small thing. Right now, as you listen to this story, you can reach out and grab a glass of clean water. You don't have to walk for hours to find a stream. You don't have to worry about parasites in the water or a predator lurking by the bank. In the prehistoric world, water was never that simple. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, imagine that you have just opened your eyes. There is no ceiling, no lights, no distant sound of traffic, no steady hum of the air conditioner in the room. There is only the sky. The sky is vast, a pale gray of early morning, with clouds drifting slowly above. The air is colder than you'd expect, and the ground beneath your back is so hard you can feel every pebble pressing through your thin clothes. You sit up, slightly disoriented. Surrounding you is a wide valley where tall grass sways in the wind. In the distance lies a dark, dense forest. There are no houses, no asphalt roads, no power lines. There is only nature. You might not realize it immediately, but at that very moment, your survival clock has already started ticking. Because in the prehistoric world, everything requires energy, and the only energy you have is your own body. The first thing you will feel is hunger. Not the mild hunger when you skip breakfast, but the kind of hunger that makes your stomach contract. Because your body knows that if you don't eat today, tomorrow will be much, much harder. You look around. There are trees. There is grass. There are a few bushes with small red berries. In the modern world, you could just pull out your phone and search, "Are these berries edible?" But here, there is no internet. No one to answer. Half of the fruits in nature might be edible. The other half could cause agonizing stomach pain or worse. You pick up a berry. It's small, round, and slightly soft. You try to sniff it. It has no particular scent, but that doesn't help much. In reality, prehistoric people learned to identify plants through years of observation and trial and error. And sometimes, those trials cost someone in the tribe their life. But you don't have a tribe. There is only you, and the silence of the vast wilderness. You hesitate for a long moment before taking a small bite. Its taste is sour and slightly bitter. Not delicious, but not too bad either. You wait. 1 minute passes. 2 minutes. Nothing happens. You eat another berry, then another. It's not enough to be full, but at least it helps ease the emptiness in your stomach. That is when you hear the first sound of the day, a slight rustle in the grass behind you. You spin around quickly. Your heart beats a little faster. In the modern world, that noise might just be a cat or a snapping twig. But here, other possibilities exist. A predator. You stare intently at the gently swaying grass. The wind blows through, making the tall blades brush against each other with a dry, whispering sound. Then a small animal hops out. It's just a rabbit. You breathe a sigh of relief. But as the rabbit vanishes into the grass, you realize something interesting. That could have been your lunch. The problem is, you have no way of catching it. No traps, no bows and arrows, no hunting experience. Meanwhile, prehistoric people spent their entire childhoods learning how to read footprints in the dirt, how to throw a spear with precision, and how to cooperate with others in the tribe. You, however, have only your 2 bare hands. The sun gradually climbs higher, and the temperature begins to rise. Golden light spreads across the valley, making the dewdrops on the grass sparkle like tiny glass beads. It is beautiful. It is a wild, primal beauty, almost entirely untouched by human traces. But that beauty also hides a simple truth. In this world, you are not the one at the top. You are just another creature, trying to survive. You stand up and begin walking toward the stream you think you saw in the distance. Your throat starts to feel parched, and water is now more important than food. The path is not easy. The ground is rugged, roots jut out from the earth, and occasionally you have to step over slippery rocks. 15 minutes pass, then 30. Finally, you hear the sound of flowing water. That sound is soothing, almost like a small piece of nature's music. As you get closer, you see a small stream winding between moss-covered boulders. The water is crystal clear. You kneel down, scooping some up with your hands. In the modern world, you wouldn't think twice, but in the prehistoric world, water can also be dangerous. Parasites, bacteria, things the naked eye cannot see. But your body is thirsty, and you know you don't have many choices. You take a small sip. The water is cold and refreshing, flowing down your parched throat. The moment is almost perfect, until you hear another sound. Not from the grass, not from the wind, but from the other side of the stream, a very low growl, almost vibrating through the air. You raise your head slowly, and for the first time today you realize something you likely never thought about back in the modern world. Here, you are not just the one looking for food. You might also be the food for something else. If you are still lying still and listening to this story, continue to let your body relax. Let your breath slow down and imagine that you are still in the pristine valley of the prehistoric world, a place with no cities, no electric lights, and nothing to protect you from nature. When we paused, you had just leaned down to drink from the cold stream. Your throat was soothed, but at that exact moment you heard a very low sound, a growl that almost vibrated through the air. You raised your head. On the other side of the stream, amidst the gray trunks and tall grass swaying in the wind, a figure stood still. At first, you saw only a dark mass. But as your eyes adjusted to the morning light, its shape gradually became clearer. It was a large beast, not large like your dog at home, not large like a deer you might have seen in a documentary. It was large in a way that made your heart race just by looking at it. A predator, its muscles tensed beneath thick fur, and pale yellow eyes stared directly at you. The distance across the stream wasn't far, perhaps only 20 meters. In the modern world, that distance means nothing. But here, 20 meters could be the difference between life and death. You stood frozen. Countless thoughts flashed through your mind. Run, climb a tree, or pretend you don't exist. Prehistoric people knew exactly what to do in these situations because they had learned since childhood. They understood the language of nature, how to read a predator's gaze, how to tell when an animal was merely curious, and when it was preparing to strike. You did not, so you just stood still. The wind blew through the valley, carrying the scent of damp earth and wild grass. The beast tilted its head slightly, as if trying to figure out what you were. Perhaps it had never seen a creature like you before. You had no claws, no sharp fangs, no horns, just a rather clumsy, two-legged creature. After a few tense seconds, the beast turned its head. It walked slowly into the forest, its massive frame gradually vanishing among the trees. You remained still for a few seconds more. Then finally you exhaled. That was perhaps the first time today you felt truly afraid. Not the imaginary fear of watching a movie, but a very real, very primal fear. One that made your body stiffen and your senses sharpen. You realized a simple truth. In the prehistoric world, you were not the ruler. You were just a relatively slow, weak creature with no natural weapons. You left the stream and walked a bit faster. Not running, but enough to put distance between yourself and the site of that encounter. The sun continued to climb. The light grew hotter and hunger returned. Those small berries from the morning had only offered temporary relief. Your body needed more energy if you were to keep moving across this vast land. You looked around, searching for something edible. After a while, you spotted a large tree with deep green fruits hanging from its branches. They looked somewhat like apples, only smaller. You picked up one that had fallen to the ground. This time you were more cautious. You took a tiny bite, then waited. The taste was astringent and slightly bitter. Not pleasant at all, but it didn't make you nauseous immediately. You ate a few more small pieces, trying to listen to your body. In the prehistoric world, eating is like a game of chance you don't want to play. Yet you must. After eating a few fruits, you decided to keep moving. You didn't know where you were going, but standing still wasn't a good option either. Prehistoric hunter-gatherers moved constantly, searching for food, water, and safe shelter. About an hour passed. You began to realize something else you hadn't considered before. Your feet were not used to walking on natural terrain. No high-quality sneakers, no flat roads, only rocks, dirt, roots, and unexpected hollows. Every step required focus. Once you slipped on a damp rock and nearly fell. If you broke a leg here, your story would end almost instantly. That is one of the truths few people think about regarding the prehistoric world. Minor injuries in modern times are easily treated. But in the wild, a simple wound can become a grave problem. You kept walking until the sun began to tilt toward the west. The light grew softer, and the long shadows of trees stretched across the ground. That was when you started thinking about the most terrifying thing of all, the night. The day was hard enough, but the night in the prehistoric world is an entirely different story. When the sun vanishes, the temperature drops rapidly. Predators become more active, and darkness envelops everything in a way you rarely see in the modern world. No streetlights, no glowing windows, only true darkness. You needed shelter before that happened. You began to observe your surroundings more carefully. A large boulder could block the wind. A hollow tree trunk might suffice for the night. Finally, you found an area where several large rocks were piled together, creating a small space like a shallow cave. Not perfect, but acceptable. You sat down inside, leaning your back against the stone. Your body had begun to tire after a long day of walking, stress, and thought. The sun gradually slipped below the horizon. The sky turned deep purple, then dark blue. The first stars appeared. They were far brighter than anything you had ever seen in the city. Thousands of tiny points of light scattered across the sky like an ancient map of the universe. In that moment, you almost forgot your fear. The prehistoric world was so vast, so quiet, and in a way, so beautiful. But that beauty did not last long, for as darkness completely blanketed the valley, other sounds began to emerge. A distant howl, the rustle of dry leaves being stepped on, a strange sound like heavy breathing somewhere in the forest. You sat still in the gap between the rocks, trying to make yourself as small as possible, because on your first night in the prehistoric world, you were about to understand one more thing. The daytime was only the easy part. It is now completely dark in the prehistoric valley, and you are huddled between cold rocks, a space just enough to block the wind, but not enough to make you feel safe. The darkness here is entirely different from the darkness you are used to. In the modern world, even at night, there is always light somewhere, from street lamps, windows, billboards, or the headlights of a passing car. But here, when the sun vanishes, the world is nearly swallowed whole by the night. There is only the moonlight hanging in the sky, and thousands of stars so bright that you feel as though you could simply reach up and touch them. You sit in silence for a long time, allowing your eyes to adjust to the gloom. Gradually, faint shapes begin to emerge. Tall trees stand like silent sentinels. Bushes sway gently in the breeze. In the distance lie the silhouettes of dark, brooding hills. Everything seems very quiet, but that silence does not last. From deep within the forest, a howl rings out. It is a long, low, and cold sound. You have never heard that sound in real life, but your body understands it instantly. It is the cry of a predator, perhaps a wolf, perhaps something much larger. The sound echoes once more, this time a bit closer, then falls silent. What follows is a silence so thick you can hear your own heartbeat. You realize a very simple truth. If a predator finds you here, you have almost no way to fight back. No weapons, no fire, no tribe, just you. You pull your knees closer to your chest, trying to stay warm in the deepening night air. The wind whistles through the rocks and seeps into the small gap where you sit, carrying the raw chill of the wilderness. The people of the prehistoric period were accustomed to this. They knew how to build fires, how to construct shelters, and most importantly, they were never alone. Prehistoric humans almost always lived in small groups. A tribe provided many things: more eyes to watch, more ears to listen, and more hands to protect one another. A solitary person in nature is almost always at a disadvantage. You begin to feel a bit drowsy, but every time your head nods off, some small noise jolts you awake. A branch snapping somewhere, the rustle of insects in the grass, a small animal scurrying through the dry leaves. Every sound makes your imagination work harder than it needs to. You wonder if there are eyes watching you in the dark from behind the trunk of a tree. Time crawls so slowly that you lose track of how much has passed. Perhaps an hour, perhaps two. Eventually, exhaustion triumphs over anxiety. Your body begins to relax, and your head rests against the cold stone wall. You don't sleep deeply. It is a fitful slumber, where every tiny sound pulls you back to alertness. In a moment between sleep and wakefulness, you hear a different sound. Not a howl, not the wind, but footsteps, very light, careful steps on the dirt. Your eyes snap open instantly. Moonlight filters through the gaps between the rocks, casting a faint streak of light on the ground. In that light, you see a moving shadow, an animal, not as massive as the beast you encountered during the day, but not small either. It stands a few meters from your shelter, its nose twitching as it sniffs the air. Perhaps it has caught your scent. You try not to move. Even your breathing becomes slower, lighter. The animal takes a step forward, then another. The moonlight reveals its shape a bit more clearly. A wild dog, or perhaps a young wolf. Its fur is gray and matted, its ears pricked in alertness. It stares into the darkness where you sit. Maybe it is trying to decide what you are, a dangerous creature, or just something weak that could be a meal. That moment feels like an eternity, though in reality it likely lasts only a few seconds. Then the animal tilts its head. It takes one more sniff, then turns away. The light footsteps fade as it moves away from your shelter until it vanishes completely into the darkness. You exhale slowly. The night is still long, but at least you have survived another small trial. Time continues to pass, and finally the eastern sky begins to brighten. A pale gray appears on the horizon. Dawn, the first light of a new day, filters through the trees and illuminates the valley. Birds begin to call out from all directions, as if nature is slowly waking up after a long night. You stand up slowly, stretching your back after hours of huddling between the rocks. You are still alive. A day in the prehistoric world has almost passed. But as you step out of your shelter and look toward the vast valley, you realize something interesting. Yesterday was only the beginning, because surviving for one day was hard. But surviving a second day in the wild, that is the true challenge. The prehistoric sky is gradually brightening, and after a long, nearly sleepless night, you stand before the vast valley with a feeling that is part relief and part anxiety. You have survived the first night, but your body quickly reminds you that the trial is far from over. Your stomach is empty, your throat is parched, and your legs still ache from a long day of traversing rugged, stony ground. Morning light spreads across the valley. A thin mist blankets the tall grass, reflecting the rising sun into thousands of tiny points of light. In this moment, nature looks so peaceful, almost harmless. But you have already learned that this tranquility can deceive anyone. You leave your shelter among the rocks and begin to head down into the valley. First, you must find water, for your body still needs it more than anything else. After a short walk, you hear the familiar sound of a stream rushing over stones. The water is as clear and cold as it was yesterday. You kneel to take small sips, more cautious this time, listening to your body after each swallow. As you look up, you notice something you hadn't seen yesterday. There are footprints along the stream bank. Many footprints. Some are small, like those of nimble animals that dart through the grass. Some are larger, pressed deep into the damp earth. And there are a few footprints, long and slender, that look almost like human footprints. You kneel for a closer look. The tracks are old, perhaps a few days old, but they signify something vital. You are not the only two-legged creature to have passed through this valley. People from the prehistoric period might have been here, perhaps a small group moving through this land in search of food or a new home. The thought brings a glimmer of hope, but also a touch of unease. If they find you, will they see you as a friend? Or as a suspicious stranger? You stand up and continue along the stream. Where there is water, there is usually food. Plants near water often have edible fruits or roots, and animals frequently come here to drink. Before long, you spot several low trees with pale yellow fruits dangling from the branches. They are small and slightly misshapen, unlike any fruit you've ever bought in a supermarket. You pluck one, turning it over in your hand. One thing you've started to learn after a day in nature is that nothing here is certain. But your hunger has become impossible to ignore. You take a tiny bite. The taste is mildly sweet, a bit tart, and softer than you expected. You wait a moment. No strange sensations, no dizziness, no nausea. You eat a few more, a little faster this time. Energy returns to your body, if only a little. But in the prehistoric world, sometimes a little energy is enough to keep you moving for a few more hours. Once finished, you sit by the bank and watch the water flow by. In that moment, you realize something interesting. In the modern world, people are almost always busy. Phones vibrate, messages pop up, and clocks remind you of the next task. But here, there is no schedule. There is only time. The water flows slowly, sunlight dancing on the surface. A small bird lands nearby, tilts its head to look at you, then flies away. The moment is almost serene. But then you remember something important. The night will return. You don't want to spend another cold, tense night like the last one. If possible, you need to find something better than a gap between rocks. A real shelter, You stand and leave the stream bank, heading toward the thinning forest ahead. The trees here are not too dense. Light still filters through the canopy, dappling the ground with patches of sun. As you go deeper into the woods, you begin to notice more signs of life. A tree trunk is scratched, perhaps by a large beast. A small bird's nest sits on a low branch, and the bushes are snapped in places as if someone, or something, passed through here recently. You slow your pace, watching every step carefully. Then you see it, a small clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing is a ring of stones arranged in a circle. Inside the ring lies a layer of gray ash, long since cooled. An old campfire. You stand frozen for a moment. This confirms what you suspected from the footprints by the stream. Humans have been here, maybe a few days ago, maybe weeks. You look around the clearing, trying to imagine the scene as it once was. Perhaps a group of people sat around this fire, talking, eating, and gazing at the same starry sky you saw last night. The thought makes this place feel a little less wild. You sit down near the stone ring and touch the cold ash. If you knew how to build a fire, this could be a good shelter for tonight. But you have no lighter, no matches, no experience. You look at your two bare hands and exhale slowly. That is when you begin to truly understand the lives of ancient humans. They weren't just stronger, they were more patient, more skillful, and understood nature in a way that modern humans rarely need to. You stand up and scan the forest once more. The sun is higher now. Your second day in the prehistoric world is still long. And if you want to survive the coming night, you will need to learn a great deal more before the sun goes down. If you are still listening to this story, continue to lie comfortably and let your mind drift slowly with the rhythm of the narrative. The sun of the second day in the prehistoric world is climbing higher, and you are still standing in the clearing within the sparse forest where the old stone ring and the cold ash of a long-extinct fire remain. You lean down to look at that layer of ash once more. The stones were arranged in a fairly neat circle, proving that whoever was here didn't just pass through for a moment. Perhaps they stayed for a while, long enough to cook, rest, and sleep for a few nights. You imagine the scene. A group of people sitting around the fire, the golden light reflecting on their faces, low voices murmuring in the night. Perhaps they were telling hunting stories, or speaking of where they would travel next on the morrow. In the world of the prehistoric period, fire was not just light. It was life. It kept one warm in the freezing night, warded off predators, and turned raw food into something more digestible. You pick up two small stones nearby and try tapping them together. They make a dry, dull sound, but no spark appears. You try again. Still, nothing happens. After a few attempts, you sigh and set them down. Making fire with stones is not something easily learned in a few minutes. Prehistoric humans spent years mastering that skill, much like a modern craftsman honing his trade. You stand up and survey the forest. If you cannot create fire, at least you need to prepare for tonight more effectively. You begin to gather dry branches scattered on the ground. Some are small, some larger. You drag them near the stone ring and pile them in a messy heap. Even without fire, at least you are ready if you find a way to create it later. Then you continue to walk around the area, observing things you might never have noticed before. A hollow tree trunk. A bush with large leaves that could serve as lining. A fallen, rotting log leaning at an angle, creating a small natural overhang. You begin to drag long branches and lean them against that log, forming a simple lean-to shelter. It isn't beautiful, and certainly not as sturdy as a house. But at least it might help block the wind if it gets cold tonight. By the time you finish, the sun is quite high. Hunger returns. Stronger this time. The small berries and wild fruit you ate earlier provided only a fraction of energy. Your body needs more if you are to keep functioning. You leave the clearing and venture deeper into the forest, hoping to find something else. After a while, you hear the sound of water, not the faint trickle of the stream from this morning. This sound is louder, more rhythmic. As you draw closer, you find a wider stretch of the stream where the water flows slowly, forming a large pool among the boulders. You sit by the bank and peer into the water. And that is when you see them, small shadows darting through the transparent water. Fish, not large but enough to catch your attention. You pick up a stone and try tossing it into the water. The fish instantly scatter, vanishing into the dark patches at the bottom of the stream. You sit in silence for a moment. In the modern world, if you want to eat fish, you simply go to a supermarket or a restaurant. But here, to get even a small fish, you need skill, patience, and sometimes, luck. You take off your shoes and step into the water. The water is so cold it makes you shiver. You walk slowly, trying not to create too many ripples. A fish swims past. You plunge your hands down quickly. Water splashes everywhere, but when you open your hands, it is gone. You try again, and again. After a few minutes, you realize that catching fish with bare hands is not nearly as easy as imagined. The fish are much faster than you, and they have the advantage of living in their own element. Finally, you return to the bank wet and slightly chilled. But despite the failure, you have learned something vital. Food in nature does not just appear. Every meal for a prehistoric person was the result of effort, experience, and sometimes failure. You sit on a rock, drying your feet in the sun. Meanwhile, a light breeze blows through the forest, rustling the leaves high above. Then you hear another sound. Not the water, not the birds, but footsteps, very light yet distinct. You turn your head. Between the distant tree trunks, a figure appears. Not a beast, not a shadow of your imagination. A human. The person stands still for a few seconds, as if observing you from afar. The distance is far enough that you cannot see their face clearly, but you can see they are holding a long spear in their hand. In that moment, a thought enters your mind. Perhaps, finally, you are no longer alone in this valley. The sun of the second day in the prehistoric world still hangs high in the sky, and you stand by the bank of the cold stream, its water flowing steadily over moss-covered stones. But now something has changed. You are no longer alone. Between the distant tree trunks stands a silent figure. The distance between you is great enough that you cannot see their face clearly, but the midday light filtering through the canopy is bright enough to reveal a few details. The person is not dressed in clothes as you know them. Instead, they wear pieces of animal hide wrapped around their shoulders and hips. In their hand is a long spear with a sharpened point, a simple weapon, yet one that can be lethal in the hands of someone who knows how to use it. You stand frozen. The figure stands frozen as well. In that moment, both of you simply watch each other through the still air of the forest. A light breeze makes the leaves tremble, creating a faint rustling sound high above. You realize that this might be the most critical moment since you appeared in this land. If this person views you as an enemy, you stand almost no chance. The people of the prehistoric period were attuned to nature, accustomed to hunting, and used to protecting their tribe from danger. You are not. Slowly, you raise both hands slightly, a simple gesture to show you are unarmed. You also try to keep your body as calm as possible, avoiding any sudden movements. The figure tilts their head. Perhaps they too are trying to understand what you are. A stranger dressed in odd clothing, standing by the stream weaponless, and looking quite out of place in this forest. After several long seconds, the person takes a step forward, then another. The distance between you gradually closes. Now you can see more clearly. They have long hair tied back, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes that scan everything with swift precision. The spear remains held firmly in their hand. You stay still. Finally, they stop about 10 meters away, close enough to see clearly, yet far enough to react should anything happen. The person says something. The sound is strange, unlike any modern language you have ever heard. It could be a question. It could be a call. You do not understand. You can only give a slight shake of your head, then place a hand over your heart as a simple way to show you mean no harm. The other person watches you intently for a few more seconds. Then they do something unexpected. They lower the spear. Not completely to the ground, but enough to show they are not preparing to attack. Then they point toward the forest behind them and utter a few more short sounds. You do not understand the words, but the gesture is clear enough. They want you to follow. You hesitate for a moment. In the modern world, you might think for a long time before deciding to trust a stranger. But here, your choices are quite limited. Being alone in the wilderness is not a good strategy for long-term survival. You give a small nod. The person turns and begins to walk into the forest. You follow behind, keeping a distance of a few meters. They move with incredible grace, making almost no sound on the bed of dry leaves. After about 15 minutes of walking, the forest begins to thin. A wide clearing opens up before you, and there, you see something you never thought you would find on this journey. A group of people. About 8 or 9 people are sitting around a small campfire. Someone is repairing a spearhead, another is peeling the bark off a type of root, and a child sits nearby playing with small stones. They all stop what they are doing when you appear. Curious gazes are immediately directed toward you. The person who led you there speaks a few short sentences to the group. Their voice is low and rapid, as if explaining something. You stand still, keenly aware of everyone's eyes on you. An older individual rises from near the fire. They walk slowly toward you, observing you from head to toe. Then they say something very brief. You still do not understand, but their voice does not sound angry, merely cautious. A moment later, they turn back to the fire and take something from a small leather pouch. It is a small piece of roasted meat, likely from a recent hunt. They offer it to you. You take it slightly surprised. The aroma is enticing. You take a small bite. The meat is a bit tough, but it is warm and full of energy. After 2 days of eating almost nothing but wild fruit, it might be the best meal you have ever had. The people in the group watch you eat, a few of them talking softly among themselves. No one appears overly tense anymore. You sit down near the campfire. Faint smoke rises into the sky, carrying the scent of burning wood and roasted meat. The firelight dances on the stones, creating a sense of warmth that you have lacked for the past 2 days. In that moment, you begin to understand something very important. Prehistoric humans may not have had skyscrapers, phones, or cities, but they had something else. They had the tribe. And in a vast wild world, sometimes the tribe is the only thing that helps a human survive for one more day. The sun of the second day has begun to tilt toward the west, casting a pale golden light that filters through the canopy and onto the clearing where the small tribe is resting. You are sitting near the campfire with these people of the ancient world. Thin smoke rises into the sky, carrying the scent of burning wood and roasted meat, a simple aroma, yet one that makes you feel remarkably at ease. Just a while ago, you were wandering alone through the vast forest. Now you are sitting in the midst of a real group of humans. They speak to one another in a language you do not understand. Short, rapid sounds that sometimes resemble calls and other times seem like questions. You can only guess their meanings through their gestures. A young man is sharpening the head of a stone spear. Each time he draws the stone blade across the wooden shaft, a fine dust falls to the ground. Nearby, a woman is peeling the bark from long roots they have just dug up from the forest. The children in the group occasionally glance at you, then whisper to one another before giggling. You must look very strange in their eyes. Your clothes are not made of animal hides, your shoes have oddly thick soles, and the way you sit is likely different from theirs. But what surprises you is that they show no signs of fear or aggression. Only curiosity. The people living in the prehistoric period were likely accustomed to encountering strange things in nature. A new animal, a new river, or a stranger. Their lives were constantly changing, always in motion. A short while later, the eldest member of the group, the one who gave you the roasted meat, sits near the fire and gestures for everyone to gather. Perhaps it is time for them to prepare dinner. A few people begin placing pieces of meat on wooden sticks near the flames. Roots are placed over the hot coals to slow roast. You watch everything intently. There are no pots, no pans, no gas or electric stoves, only fire, stone, and patience. Yet somehow they still create a meal. As the food begins to cook, the aroma spreads across the clearing. A small child is given a piece of roasted root. They blow on it gently a few times before taking a small bite. You realize something quite interesting. In the modern world, meals often happen very quickly. People eat while looking at their phones, watching TV, or rushing before returning to work. But here, a meal is an event. Everyone sits in a circle around the fire. They eat slowly, talking and occasionally breaking into laughter. Someone hands you another small piece of meat. You nod in thanks even if they might not understand the word. As you finish eating, the sky above begins to turn a deep purple. The first stars appear overhead, twinkling through the gaps in the canopy. Night is coming, but this time the feeling is very different from the night before. You no longer have to lie huddled between cold rocks. A few people in the group begin adding wood to the fire. The flames leap higher and a warm golden glow spreads across the clearing. An older man begins to recount something. You do not understand their language, but the way everyone listens suggests it is likely a story. Occasionally, the whole group erupts in laughter. A small child leans their head against their mother's shoulder and gradually drifts off to sleep. A gentle breeze blows through the forest, carrying the scent of leaves and wood smoke. You look up at the sky. No city lights, no airplanes, no artificial glow. Only a vast night sky filled with stars. Perhaps it is the clearest sky humans have ever seen. You begin to feel your eyelids grow heavy. After 2 long days in nature, your body finally allows itself to rest. You lie down near the fire, on a bed of dry grass that someone has spread out. The warmth of the fire reaches you, and the sounds of conversation fade as everyone, one by one, falls into sleep. Before drifting off, one final thought enters your mind. Perhaps you were wrong. Perhaps modern humans aren't entirely helpless if they were to live in prehistoric times. But they would certainly need to learn a great deal. And tomorrow, when the sun rises again over this ancient forest, you will begin to understand a little more about how humans truly survive in this wild world. If you are still listening to this story, Continue to relax your body and let your breath slow down a little. The tribe's fire still smolders in the clearing, and the night sky of the ancient world stretches out above, filled with stars so bright you can almost imagine reaching out to touch them. Night in the forest is quieter than you thought. Occasionally, there is only the sound of insects, the wind whispering through the leaves, and the soft crackle of wood in the fire. The people of the tribe are asleep. A few lie close together to keep warm, while others lean their backs against tree trunks. You had slept for a while too, but woke up in the middle of the night. Not because of a loud noise, simply because your body is still not used to sleeping in the heart of nature. You open your eyes and look around. The faint firelight casts long shadows on the ground. A man from the tribe sits near the fire, likely the firekeeper for the night. He holds a long wooden branch and occasionally nudges more fuel into the glowing embers. Seeing you move, he looks over. He says nothing, only gives a slight nod. You nod back. In the modern world, two strangers rarely sit in silence together without feeling awkward. But here, the silence is perfectly natural. You look up at the sky. No city lights, no skyscrapers, no sound of traffic. Only the night sky of the prehistoric period where ancient humans once looked up and wondered about those distant points of light. Perhaps they also told stories about the stars, just as many cultures would do later on. You lie still for a while longer, listening to the gentle breeze blowing through the forest. Then finally you drift back to sleep. When you wake again, the sky is brightened. Not the harsh glare of a city morning, but a soft light gradually spreading through the canopy. A few birds begin to sing, a sound small yet clear in the cool morning air. Your third day in the prehistoric world has begun. The people of the tribe wake quite early. A few have already stood up and headed toward the forest, likely to find food or scout the surrounding area. A woman is rekindling the campfire from the embers left over from last night. You sit up and stretch. Your body is still a bit stiff, but much better than on the first day. A child in the tribe looks at you and laughs. They hold a small stone and hand it to you as if it were a gift. You take it and smile. Without needing language, you still understand the meaning of that gesture. A while later, two men return from the forest with several small animals hanging from leather cords. Perhaps they are rabbits or rodents they have just hunted. Everyone begins to prepare breakfast. You watch very closely how they work. One person uses a sharp stone to cut the meat. Another gathers dry branches to keep the fire burning steadily. Everything happens in a fairly orderly fashion, even though no one is giving orders. It seems everyone knows exactly what they must do. You realize something very important. In the wild, cooperation is what helps humans survive. A solitary person finds it very difficult to survive for long, but a small group can share the work, share the food, and protect one another. After a simple meal, the tribe begins to prepare to leave. They do not build permanent houses like modern humans. Their life is one of movement. When food in an area begins to grow scarce, they will continue on to somewhere else. You watch them pack up very quickly. Only a few leather pouches, a few spears, and some stone tools. No heavy furniture, no large luggage. Their lives are literally light. The elder of the group, the one who seems to be the leader, looks at you for a moment, then gestures for you to stand up. Then he points toward the small path leading into the forest. It is clear they are about to continue their journey. You stand still for a moment. 3 days ago, you were a person living in the modern world, where everything was familiar and easy. Now you are standing in the midst of an ancient tribe, preparing to go deeper into a land you know almost nothing about. You take a deep breath, and then you follow them. As the whole group begins to move through the ancient forest, you realize that life in prehistoric times isn't just about surviving for a day. It is about learning how to live with nature, one step at a time. The morning in the ancient forest grows clearer, and the small tribe you are traveling with has begun their journey. No one speaks much. They simply walk in silence past towering trees, where the early sunlight pierces through the canopy and creates long streaks of light on the ground. You follow behind them, attempting to move as lightly as they do. But you quickly realize something. Walking in the forest is not simple at all. Sometimes the ground is soft and slippery beneath a layer of rotting leaves. Sometimes large roots jut out, forcing you to step around them. And occasionally you hear the snap of a twig under your feet, a mistake the people of the tribe never seem to make. They move with incredible lightness, almost without a sound. The people of the prehistoric period were used to listening to the forest. They knew exactly where to place their feet, which spots to avoid, and when to stop. After about an hour of walking, the person leading the group suddenly raises a hand. The entire tribe stops instantly. No one asks a thing. No one says a word. Everyone stands perfectly still. You stop as well, though you don't yet understand what is happening. The man in front crouches low and peers toward a gap between the bushes. You try to look in the same direction. At first you see nothing. Then suddenly, you spot movement. A small herd of animals is grazing in the clearing ahead. They have slender bodies, thin legs, and move very quickly whenever they hear a sound. The hunters in the tribe exchange a few brief gestures. Two of them circle around to the left. Another moves forward in total silence. You stay still, trying to do nothing at all. Your heart beats a little faster, even though you are merely an observer. One of the hunters raises his spear. The next moment happens very fast. The spear flies through the air and thuds into the ground right in front of the herd. They immediately panic and scatter. The two people on the other side suddenly appear, forcing the animals to change direction. In those few brief seconds, one animal is separated from the group. Another person flings a second spear. This time it hits the mark. The animal falls. Everything grows quiet again almost instantly. The rest of the herd vanishes into the forest. The hunter approaches the prey and performs a quick check. You stand there, slightly stunned. In the modern world, buying food is usually very simple. But here, every meal is the result of skill, patience, and teamwork. The tribe members tie the animal to a long pole. Two of them carry it on their shoulders as the whole group begins to retrace their steps. No one eats immediately. They will bring the prey to their next resting spot. Around midday, the tribe stops near another stream. This is where they decide to rest for the day. A few people begin to build a fire while others process the prey they just caught. You sit on a nearby rock and observe. The labor is divided naturally. No one gives orders, yet everyone knows exactly what to do. The meat is cut into portions. Some are roasted immediately over the fire. Others are hung near the smoke to preserve them longer. Smoke from the fire rises slowly, carrying the scent of roasted meat throughout the forest. A child from the tribe runs up to you again. They point at your shoes and say something that makes the other children laugh. Perhaps they find your shoes very strange. You look down at your footwear. In the modern world, they are just an ordinary pair of shoes. But here, they are completely alien. This makes you realize something interesting. If a modern person were to return to prehistoric times, almost everything they brought with them would look bizarre. The clothes, the shoes, the way of speaking, even the way they sit and eat. You look at the tribe members sitting around the fire. They talk, laugh softly, and share portions of food with one another. Their lives are simple, but they are also very real. No clocks, no work schedules, no emails or phones. There is only the sunrise, the sunset, and the act of surviving day by day. As the sun begins to dip toward the horizon, the forest turns a warm golden hue again. The tribe has finished eating and begins to prepare for the coming night. You sit near the campfire and watch the tiny sparks fly up into the sky. By now, you have been in the prehistoric world for nearly 3 days, and you are beginning to understand the original question more clearly: why it is so difficult for a modern person to survive here. It is not because ancient humans were stronger. It is because they understood this world in a way that you are only just beginning to learn. The fire before you burns softly in the heart of the ancient forest, and the afternoon sky of the third day gradually fades into a pale orange. The small tribe you are traveling with has halted near the stream. After the morning hunt, everyone seems a bit more relaxed. A few are sitting and resharpening their stone tools, while others gather dry branches to keep the fire burning throughout the night. You sit nearby, listening to the familiar sounds of the forest, the flow of water, the gentle breeze, and occasionally the sound of birds soaring past the high canopy. Just a few days ago, these sounds might have made you anxious, but now they are becoming familiar, like a part of the natural rhythm that the people of the prehistoric period lived with for thousands of years. The eldest member of the tribe sits near the campfire. He holds a thin shard of stone and slowly grinds it into a sharp blade. The work is incredibly slow, almost meditative. You realize that here, no one is in a hurry. Everything moves according to the rhythm of nature. If the sun is still high, they work. When it grows dark, they rest. When it is cold, they build a fire. When they are hungry, they hunt or gather food. Life is simple, but it is by no means easy. After a while, the sky begins to darken. The tribe members gather around the fire just as they did the night before. The golden firelight reflects off sun-bronzed faces, casting long shadows upon the earth. A child falls asleep on their mother's shoulder. A man adds a few large logs to the fire. The soft crackle of burning wood fills the air. The elder begins to speak to the group. You do not understand his words, but the slow, warm cadence of his voice sounds like a story. Perhaps he is recounting a past hunt, or a land the tribe once journeyed through, or perhaps it is simply a tale to bring a long day to a close. You sit quietly and listen, even without understanding the language, but you understand the feeling. It is the feeling of humans gathering by the fire, when the darkness of the deep forest surrounds them and the small flame becomes the center of the world. You look up at the sky. Thousands of stars appear with perfect clarity. No artificial light obscures them. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a silver path across the heavens. Perhaps ancient humans looked up at this sky thousands of times and pondered the exact same questions we do today. Where we come from, where we are going, and how many unknowns still remain in this vast world. You exhale slowly. 3 days ago, you didn't know how to find water in the forest. You didn't know how to observe animal tracks. You didn't know how to move without making a sound. But now, even if only a little, you have begun to learn. You understand that nature is not an enemy. It is simply a world with its own set of rules. These ancient people did not conquer nature. They learned to live with it. The firelight gradually dims as everyone, one by one, lies down to sleep. You also lie on the dry grass nearby, feeling the lingering warmth from the hearth. The sounds of the night forest rise again. The insects, the wind, the distant sound of flowing water. Your eyelids grow heavy, and before drifting into sleep, you realize something very clearly. If a modern person truly returned to prehistoric times, they likely wouldn't survive for long. At least at first. Not because they are weaker, but because they have forgotten how to listen to the natural world. But if they are patient, if they learn bit by bit from the people who live here, then perhaps, just perhaps, they too could find a way to survive for one more day in this ancient world. The fire before you now consists only of smoldering red embers, and the ancient forest is submerged in the quiet darkness of the third night. You sleep quite deeply, deeper than the previous nights, perhaps because your body is exhausted after hours of travel, or perhaps because for the first time since arriving in this world, you feel a bit safer sleeping among other humans. The night passes slowly. Occasionally there is the snap of a branch deep in the forest, perhaps a large beast passing by, but the fire and the presence of the group keep the small camp peaceful. When you wake, the eastern sky has already begun to brighten. A thin layer of mist blankets the ground, making the blades of grass glisten under the first light of day. The morning air is cool and incredibly crisp. The fourth day in the ancient world has begun. The tribe members wake up one by one as well. No one needs an alarm clock. Sunlight and natural circadian rhythms seem to be enough. One man rises first to scout the area around the camp. 2 others rekindle the fire from the remaining embers. You sit up and look around. After a few days here, you've begun to notice many details you hadn't seen before. For instance, the way they arrange their sleeping quarters. The strong and healthy usually sleep on the outer ring near the edge of the camp, while children and the elderly lie closer to the fire. This is not by chance. In the wilderness of the prehistoric period, every small detail has its reason. A woman hands you a roasted root, still warm from the fire. You take it and nod in thanks. After a few days, simple gestures like this have become the familiar way of communicating between you and the tribe. You eat slowly. Meanwhile, 2 hunters are checking their spears. They use leather cords to tighten the stone heads, then practice throwing at a nearby tree trunk. The spear thuds into the wood, precise and powerful. You watch this and suddenly think that if you had to learn this skill yourself, it would likely take months to throw like that. After a simple breakfast, the tribe prepares to move again. Their lives rarely stop for long in one place. Food in the forest changes with the seasons, the herds, and the flow of water, and so they are always walking. You stand up and look around the small campsite. In just a few minutes, this place will return to what it was, a clearing in the woods, with almost no trace that a group of people ever slept here. They leave no trash, no waste. They do not destroy the nature around them. They simply pass through. It is a way of life very different from the modern world, where humans often leave their mark everywhere. The leader gestures for the group to continue. You follow them once more, passing through towering trees and along small paths that only they seem to recognize. After a while, the forest begins to change. The massive trees thin out, and a wider landscape appears ahead. More sunlight pours down, warming the earth. One of the hunters stops and points at the ground. You lean down to look. Footprints, but not human footprints. They are large, deep, and have a very strange shape. A few members of the tribe exchange short sounds. You don't understand what they are saying, but their faces have grown a bit more serious. The leader stares at those footprints for quite a while. Then he turns and signals the group to circle around in a different direction. You don't know exactly what animal left those tracks, but the way the tribe reacts makes you understand one thing. In this vast forest, humans are not always the strongest creatures, and sometimes the best way to survive is to know when to stay away. The morning of the fourth day remains quite cool. Sunlight pierces through the high canopy, creating long streaks of light across the ground covered in dry leaves. The tribe you're traveling with has just decided to change direction after spotting those massive footprints in the damp earth. You don't know exactly what creature left those tracks behind, but the way the hunters exchange glances, combined with the heightened caution in every step they take afterward, makes you realize it was certainly no small animal. In the world of the prehistoric period, humans did not stand at the peak of the food chain as they do today. They were merely one species among many. The tribe moves a bit more slowly now. The leader stops occasionally, scouting the surroundings before continuing forward. Everyone keeps a tighter formation, as if the entire group is moving as a single organism. You too begin to pay more attention to the forest, the scent of damp earth, the buzzing of insects, the sudden flight of birds from a distant thicket. All these tiny details seem to be the language of nature, a language the tribe members learned to read since they were very young. After about an hour of trekking, the forest gradually opens up. Ahead lies a lowland area filled with shrubs and tall grass. In the center of this land is a small lake reflecting the morning sun. The tribe halts. A few people kneel to examine the tracks near the water's edge. There are countless animal signs here. The small prints of herbivores, several claw marks from predators, and even the tracks of large birds. This is clearly a place where many species come to drink. The leader shares a quick exchange with a few others. Then, they signal for the group to rest for a while. Some go to gather dry branches. Others head toward the lake to scout the perimeter. You sit down on a boulder and gaze at the still surface of the water. A light breeze creates small ripples across the lake. A large bird flies low over the water and lands on the opposite bank. The moment is very peaceful. But then, you notice something interesting. The people of the tribe never fully relax. Even while resting, they are constantly scanning their surroundings. Their eyes are always moving. Their ears seem to be listening for the slightest sound. It is a survival habit. In the wild, a single moment of distraction is sometimes enough to invite danger. A while later, two hunters return from the lakeside. They speak rapidly to the leader. You don't understand the words, but their gestures are clear enough. Something has passed through this area recently. Not a small beast, perhaps a massive one. The leader ponders for a few seconds and then signals everyone to prepare to leave. They don't want to linger too long near this water source. You stand up to follow them, but before leaving, you glance back at the lake one more time. The water is as still as before. If not for the footprints on the bank, you would never have known how many creatures had visited this place during the night. The tribe continues moving toward the low hills in the distance. The path gradually slopes upward, and when you turn your head, the small lake has already vanished behind the bushes. You begin to realize something very clearly. Life in prehistoric times wasn't just about hunting or finding food. Most of the time, it was simply about moving, traveling from one place to another, avoiding dangerous areas, seeking safer ground. And as you follow the tribe through the ancient forest paths, you begin to understand that survival in this world isn't a matter of a single day. It is a story of every footstep, following one after another through many long days. If you are still listening to this story, continue to relax your body and let your breath slow down a little. The tribe's fire still smolders in the clearing, and the night sky of the ancient world stretches out above, filled with stars so bright you can almost imagine reaching out to touch them. Night in the forest is quieter than you thought. Occasionally, there is only the sound of insects, the wind whispering through the leaves, and the soft crackle of wood in the fire. The people of the tribe are asleep. A few lie close together to keep warm, while others lean their backs against tree trunks. You had slept for a while too, but woke up in the middle of the night. Not because of a loud noise, simply because your body is still not used to sleeping in the heart of nature. You open your eyes and look around. The faint firelight casts long shadows on the ground. A man from the tribe sits near the fire, likely the firekeeper for the night. He holds a long wooden branch and occasionally nudges more fuel into the glowing embers. Seeing you move, he looks over. He says nothing, only gives a slight nod. You nod back. In the modern world, two strangers rarely sit in silence together without feeling awkward. But here, the silence is perfectly natural. You look up at the sky. No city lights, no skyscrapers, no sound of traffic. Only the night sky of the prehistoric period, where ancient humans once looked up and wondered about those distant points of light. Perhaps they also told stories about the stars, just as many cultures would do later on. You lie still for a while longer, listening to the gentle breeze blowing through the forest. Then, finally, you drift back to sleep. When you wake again, the sky has brightened. Not the harsh glare of a city morning, but a soft light gradually spreading through the canopy. A few birds begin to sing, a sound small yet clear in the cool morning air. Your third day in the prehistoric world has begun. The people of the tribe wake quite early. A few have already stood up and headed toward the forest, likely to find food or scout the surrounding area. A woman is rekindling the campfire from the embers left over from last night. You sit up and stretch. Your body is still a bit stiff, but much better than on the first day. A child in the tribe looks at you and laughs. They hold a small stone and hand it to you as if it were a gift. You take it and smile. Without needing language, you still understand the meaning of that gesture. A while later, two men return from the forest with several small animals hanging from leather cords. Perhaps they are rabbits or rodents they have just hunted. Everyone begins to prepare breakfast. You watch very closely how they work. One person uses a sharp stone to cut the meat. Another gathers dry branches to keep the fire burning steadily. Everything happens in a fairly orderly fashion, even though no one is giving orders. It seems everyone knows exactly what they must do. You realize something very important. In the wild, cooperation is what helps humans survive. A solitary person finds it very difficult to survive for long, but a small group can share the work, share the food, and protect one another. After a simple meal, the tribe begins to prepare to leave. They do not build permanent houses like modern humans. Their life is one of movement. When food in an area begins to grow scarce, they will continue on to somewhere else. You watch them pack up very quickly. Only a few leather pouches, a few spears, and some stone tools. No heavy furniture, no large luggage. Their lives are literally light. The elder of the group, the one who seems to be the leader, looks at you for a moment, then gestures for you to stand up. Then he points toward the small path leading into the forest. It is clear they are about to continue their journey. You stand still for a moment. 3 days ago, you were a person living in the modern world, where everything was familiar and easy. Now you are standing in the midst of an ancient tribe, preparing to go deeper into a land you know almost nothing about. You take a deep breath, and then you follow them. As the whole group begins to move through the ancient forest, you realize that life in prehistoric times isn't just about surviving for a day. It is about learning how to live with nature, one step at a time. Continue to relax your body and let your imagination walk slowly alongside the small tribe resting in the middle of the vast valley. The sun of the fourth day has climbed quite high in the sky. Golden light spreads across the grasslands, making the tall stalks sway in the wind like soft waves. From where you sit beneath the shade of the tree, you can see the river curving in the distance, glistening like a metallic ribbon under the sun. The tribe rests quite peacefully. A few people lie on their backs in the grass, eyes closed to relax after the long trek. 2 hunters are still resharpening the stone tips of their spears, every movement slow and precise. You sit with your back against the tree trunk, looking out over the valley. It is a very strange feeling. In the modern world, if you sit still in one place for too long, you might feel like you are wasting time. But here, rest is an essential part of survival. The people of the prehistoric period could not race against time as we do. They had to move when necessary, rest when needed, and observe nature before deciding on their next move. After a while, the leader stands up. He gazes toward the river in the valley and speaks a few short sentences to the hunters. Perhaps they are considering heading down near the water before nightfall. Water is always a vital place, but water also attracts many other creatures. The group begins to stand up, preparing to move again. You brush the grass from your clothes and follow them. The path down into the valley is relatively easy, but the grass, reaching up to your knees, makes it harder to observe the surroundings. You begin to hear more sounds. The rustle of insects in the grass, the sound of birds taking flight from the bushes, and occasionally the faint scurrying of a small animal darting past. As the group draws closer to the river, the air grows cooler. The scent of water and damp earth drifts on the breeze. You begin to see footprints along the riverbank. Many footprints. There are small tracks of herbivores. There are claw marks of predators. And there are long slide marks in the mud, likely from a large animal slipping into the water. The tribe stops a short distance from the bank to observe. The leader kneels to examine the tracks for a long time. Then he looks up at the slow-moving current before him. The river is not too wide. but it is deep enough for the current to be strong in the middle. Large boulders are scattered along the banks. A few waterfowl stand on the rocks, occasionally dipping down to peck at something in the water. One person in the group approaches the bank and kneels to drink. The others follow suit, one by one. You also draw near. The water is freezing when it touches your hands. You take a few small sips and feel your throat soothed immediately. After drinking, the tribe does not leave right away. It seems they have decided to stay in this area until evening. Some begin to gather dry branches near the riverbank. Others search for flat stones to rebuild a small hearth. You help them by dragging a few large branches closer. Though no one says a word, you are starting to feel like a small part of the group. The sun gradually dips toward the horizon. The afternoon light turns the river's surface to a golden orange. Flocks of birds fly low over the water before vanishing into the distant thickets. As the campfire is lit, the flames reflect on the water like tiny sparks. The tribe gathers around the fire again, just like the previous nights. You sit there, listening to the steady flow of water behind your back. And in that quiet moment, you begin to realize something very clearly. Modern humans often think that prehistoric life was nothing but hardship and danger. That is true. But at the same time, it was a life lived in profound closeness to nature. No concrete walls, no city noise. Only earth, water, wind, fire. And the humans who learned to exist amidst it all. The fire burns steadily while the evening darkness slowly envelops the valley. And as you look up at the sky where the first stars are beginning to appear, you know that another night in this ancient world is about to begin. The sun has completely vanished behind the distant hills. The sky shifts gradually from orange to deep purple and finally into a profound blue-black. The first stars begin to appear, their faint reflections shimmering on the slow-moving surface of the river. Your small tribe is gathered around the campfire. The fire burns steadily, radiating a comforting warmth into the night air as it grows colder. A few large logs have been carefully placed to keep the flames alive throughout the night. You sit within that circle. After several days of living with them, the silence between you and these ancient humans no longer feels alien. You still do not understand their language, but many things require no words. A man is carefully retrying the leather cords around the head of his spear. A woman uses a sharp stone to slice small pieces of meat from the remains of the morning's hunt. The aroma of roasting meat begins to drift through the air. Smoke from the fire rises slowly, carrying the scent of burning wood and the damp earth from the nearby riverbank. The people living in the prehistoric period may not have much, but they always know how to make the most of what nature provides. A piece of roasted meat is handed to you. You take it and eat slowly. After days of eating mostly wild fruit and roots, meals like this become incredibly precious. As everyone eats, the sound of the river flowing behind your back creates a steady rhythm, almost like a background track composed by nature itself. A while later, the eldest member of the tribe begins to tell a story once more. His voice is deep and slow. You do not understand the words, but the way the others listen suggests it is likely a familiar tale. Occasionally, a few people break into laughter. A small child tries to stay awake to hear more, but finally falls asleep on their mother's shoulder. The firelight reflects on everyone's faces, creating long shadows that dance upon the ground. You look up at the sky. Thousands of stars stretch across the heights. The Milky Way extends like a silver path through the night sky. Perhaps these ancient humans looked up at that same sky for thousands of years. No telescopes, no science books, yet they still observed the stars, recognized familiar patterns, and perhaps used them to navigate as they moved across vast lands. A gentle breeze blows through the valley. The grass rustles softly. In the distance, you hear the long howl of a predator echoing from the dark forest. That sound causes several members of the tribe to lift their heads. One man stands up, stepping outside the fire's glow to scout the surroundings. After a few seconds, he returns and sits back down. It seems the beast is quite far away, but that moment reminds you that this world is still full of danger. In nature, humans are never completely safe. You look around at the group sitting by the fire. They have no high walls for protection. No electric lights, no locked doors, but they have something else. They have each other, a small tribe in the midst of a vast world. The fire continues to burn as everyone gradually drifts off to sleep. You lie down on the bed of dry grass near the hearth, feeling the warmth spread gently across your skin. The river continues to flow, the insects in the grass still hum, and the vast night sky still stretches overhead. You close your eyes, feeling your body slowly relax after the long day. And before falling into sleep, you realize that life in prehistoric times is not just a challenge. For those who are accustomed to it, it is simply daily life. The night by the riverbank passed quite peacefully, and when you open your eyes again, the eastern sky is gradually turning the pale blue of dawn. A thin veil of mist floats over the water. The river flows as slowly as it did last night, reflecting the sun's first rays. The morning air is cool and incredibly crisp, carrying the scent of damp grass and the faint smell of wood smoke lingering from the fire. The 5th day in the ancient world has begun. A few tribe members have woken up before you. They sit near the red embers remaining from the campfire and begin adding small twigs to rekindle the flame. The firelight grows brighter, breaking the silence of the early morning. You sit up, stretch, and look around the small camp. After several days of living with them, you've begun to grow accustomed to this rhythm of life. No alarm clocks, no work schedules, only the sunrise and the start of a new day. The people of the prehistoric period seem to always wake with the first light of day. A woman hands you a piece of roasted root, still warm. You take it and eat slowly while the others prepare for the day's work. 2 hunters re-examine their spears. Another person walks along the riverbank to check for new tracks in the mud. The children are still curled up asleep near the fire, reluctant to wake just yet. After eating, the leader stands and signals for a few men to join him. They take their spears and leave the camp, heading toward the distant grasslands. Perhaps they are scouting the area or searching for signs of a herd. You and the others remain near the river. A woman is carefully stripping the bark from small branches to extract the inner fibers. These fibers are then twisted into thin cords. You sit and observe for a long time. Tasks like these seem simple, yet they require immense patience. In the modern world, if you need a rope, you simply buy it at a store. But here, everything must be crafted from scratch, fiber by fiber, tool by tool. After a while, you stand up and walk along the riverbank. The water is so clear that you can see the small stones at the bottom. A few tiny fish dart through the shallows. You try standing perfectly still, just as you've seen the tribe members do. Just standing, not moving, listening. After a few minutes, you begin to notice small sounds that you hadn't paid attention to before. The gurgle of water swirling around rocks. The hum of insects flying across the water's surface. The whisper of the wind through the grass. This world seems to become clearer when you truly stop to listen to it. A while later, the hunters return. They speak rapidly to the leader remaining in the camp. Though you don't understand the words, their expressions show they have seen something. A large herd is moving through the valley. It might be their next hunting target. The group begins to prepare. Spears are checked once more. Leather cords are tightened. A few people take ash from the fire and rub it lightly on their hands and faces, perhaps to mask their scent before the hunt. You stand and watch it all unfold. In just a few days, you have learned so much. But you also understand that if you were to live here long term, there is still so much you do not know. The leader looks at you for a moment, then signals that you may stay at the camp with the others. Perhaps today's hunt will be difficult. You nod. The hunters then depart, gradually vanishing amidst the tall grass of the valley. The small camp returns to silence. You sit down near the fire and watch the smoke drift toward the sky. Another morning in the prehistoric world is unfolding. And with each passing day, you understand more clearly that ancient humans did not survive by strength alone. They survived through patience and a profound understanding of the world around them. Continue to relax your body and let your mind drift slowly through the quiet morning of the ancient valley. After the hunters left the camp, the area by the riverbank became much more silent. Only a few people remained. A woman was tending to 2 small children. An elderly man sat near the campfire, slowly rotating a piece of stone to regrind its sharp edge. You sit nearby, watching the river's surface glistening under the morning sun. Occasionally, a waterfowl flies past, its wings flapping lightly against the water before it lands on a large boulder. Time here flows much slower than in the modern world. No phones, no clocks, only the light of the sun moving gradually across the sky. The people living in the prehistoric period seem to measure time by such simple things. You stand up and walk a bit further along the riverbank. The ground here is soft and damp. Looking down, you see various footprints imprinted on the layer of mud. There are hoofprints of herbivores. There are small tracks of creatures that darted through the night. And there are deeper impressions, perhaps from a large beast that came down to the river to drink. You kneel to observe them for a long time. A few days ago, these tracks were merely strange shapes on the ground. But now you begin to realize they have meaning. They tell small stories of the creatures that have passed through this place. Perhaps that is exactly how the ancient hunters tracked their prey. You continue walking a few more meters when you suddenly hear a sound in the nearby grass. A soft sound. You stop immediately. In the modern world, such a small noise might mean nothing. But here, every sound can be vital. You stand perfectly still. After a few seconds, a small animal leaps out from the thicket. It resembles a wild rabbit with long ears and nimble legs. The creature pauses for a second to look at you, then bolts away into the grassland. You exhale with relief. Moments like this remind you that in nature you must always stay alert. When you return to the camp, you see the elderly man still grinding stone. The sound of the two stones clashing creates a steady rhythm, almost like a slow beating pulse. You sit down beside him. He looks at you for a moment, then hands you a small shard of stone and gestures for you to try. You take the stone and begin attempting to grind its edge just as he is doing. At first it is quite difficult. The shard slips from your hand several times, but after a while you begin to understand how to hold it steady. Simple tools like these helped ancient humans survive for thousands of years. No metal, no machinery. Only stone, wood, and the dexterity of human hands. Quite a bit of time passes. The sun has climbed higher in the sky. The wind in the valley begins to warm up. You lift your head to look out across the grassland where the hunters departed this morning. From a distance, you spot some small movements. Figures are returning. It seems the hunt has concluded. The people in the camp begin to take notice as well. The woman stands up, shielding her eyes with her hand to see more clearly. Gradually, you realize that the hunters are not returning empty-handed. They are dragging something behind them, a large prey. As they draw closer, you can clearly see a beast with a massive body and thick fur. Perhaps this morning's hunt was a success. The people in the camp begin to prepare. The campfire is rekindled. Flat stones are dragged closer to process the kill. Another day in the life of the tribe continues, and you realize that every day in the prehistoric world revolves around one very simple, yet profoundly important thing: finding food, keeping the fire burning, and surviving one more day in this vast, wild world. The figures on the grassland grew clearer by the moment. At first, they were mere specks moving amidst the golden stalks. But as they drew closer, you began to distinguish the familiar silhouettes of long spears and the hides draped over their shoulders. And just as you had guessed, this morning's hunt was a success. 4 hunters were dragging a large beast using thick leather cords. Its body was heavy, with a dense dark brown coat covering almost its entire frame. Each tug was a visible struggle, yet their faces showed no signs of exhaustion. On the contrary, there was a palpable sense of calm and satisfaction. In the world of the people living in the prehistoric period, a successful hunt was never just a stroke of luck. It was the culmination of experience, patience, and the seamless coordination of the entire group. As they reached the riverbank, those in the camp immediately rushed out to assist. The prey was laid down on a flat patch of ground near the campfire. A few people quickly set about their familiar tasks. The elder used a sharp stone shard to slit the thick hide. Others held the animal's limbs to make the processing easier. You stood a few paces back, watching everything unfold. This work was by no means fast, but each person seemed to know exactly what they had to do. The hide was carefully separated. The meat was divided into portions. Large bones were set aside, likely to be crafted into tools later. No part of the animal went to waste. A few strips of fresh meat were placed immediately onto the hot stones near the fire. Smoke rose, carrying the aroma of roasting meat throughout the camp. The children had also woken up and sat nearby, watching the adults work with curious eyes. You sat down near the campfire. After a while, a woman handed you a small piece of meat that had just finished roasting. It was still sizzling hot. You took a slow bite. The flavor was rich and carried a hint of smoke from the fire. After days of living in nature, meals like this began to feel far more significant. In the modern world, food typically comes from a shop or a restaurant. But here, every meal was the result of immense effort. Once most of the meat had been processed, some pieces were hung on branches near the fire to be smoked. Perhaps that was the tribe's way of preserving food for the days ahead. The sun had now moved near the center of the sky. Its light hit the river's surface, making the water glisten like tiny shards of glass. After hours of labor, the tribe began to rest. A few people sprawled out on the grass near the shade of the trees. The children ran around the camp, occasionally giggling as they chased one another. You leaned against a large boulder and looked around. In just a few days, this small camp by the riverbank had become familiar. You began to recognize the faces, the habits, the tasks that repeated every day. And the interesting thing was, even though life here was very simple, it had a very distinct rhythm. Wake up in the morning, find food, prepare tools, rest, and when the sun sets, the whole tribe gathers around the fire once more. A light breeze blew through the valley. The grass continued to sway under the sunlight. You gazed out at the slow-moving river ahead, and in that quiet moment you suddenly understood one more thing. Modern humans often think they couldn't possibly survive in prehistoric times. Perhaps that is true. But if given enough time to learn from those who have lived here their entire lives, perhaps you too would begin to understand how they exist amidst this vast wild world. Hello everyone. If you are still listening to this story, please continue to relax and let your mind drift slowly back to the small camp by the riverbank, where the afternoon is passing very peacefully. After the morning hunt ended and most of the work processing the prey was finished, the tribe entered the quiet period of the day. The sun gradually tilted toward the west. Warm golden light bathed the tall grass, making the entire valley look like a sea of soft waves moving in slow motion. A few pieces of meat were still hanging near the fire to be smoked. Smoke rose in thin ribbons and dissolved into the crystal-clear afternoon air. You sit nearby, watching the gentle flames. Occasionally, a log crackles, sending tiny sparks flying into the air before they vanish. The people of the prehistoric period seem very accustomed to these moments of stillness. No one is in a hurry. No one worries too much about tomorrow. Everything happens according to the rhythm of nature. A young man is repairing a spearhead that was chipped during the hunt. Using a small shard of stone, he taps lightly against the edge of another stone head, creating sharper flakes. The sound of stone striking stone rings out with steady regularity. On the other side of the campfire, a woman is carefully sewing a hide with a thin cord. Perhaps that hide will become a cloak or a blanket for the colder nights ahead. The children continue to play around the camp. They pick up small branches and pretend they are spears, just like the adults. Occasionally, they run through the nearby grassland and back again, laughing aloud. You watch them for a long time. Even in this harsh world, children still find a way to play. The wind begins to pick up slightly as the afternoon wears on. Long clouds drift slowly across the sky. In the distance, you see large flocks of birds flying in V formations, likely migrating toward another body of water before nightfall. Time seems to move very slowly. No sound of cars, no sound of machinery, only the wind, the water, and the subtle sounds of nature. You stand up and walk a little way from the camp toward the river. The water flows as steadily as it did this morning. Large boulders are scattered along the bank, and a few tiny fish dart through the shallows. You reach down and pick up a smooth stone from the water's edge. It is polished and cool in your hand. Perhaps this stone has lain here for hundreds, even thousands of years, gradually worn down by the current. In the prehistoric world, time feels far more vast than the brief span of human life. By the time you return to the camp, the sun has nearly touched the horizon. The light shifts to a deep orange. The long shadows of the people in the campfire stretch across the ground. A few members of the tribe begin gathering more firewood for the evening. Logs are dragged closer to the hearth, preparing for another night under the starlit sky. You help them, carrying several dry branches from the edge of the field. Though it is a small task, it makes you feel like you are no longer just an observer. You are truly living among them. When the sun finally disappears behind the distant hills, the valley gradually sinks into the soft darkness of twilight. The fire in the camp flares up brighter once more. Everyone begins to gather around the hearth again. Another day in the ancient world is drawing to a close, and as you sit by that warm glow, you realize that with each passing day here, you understand more clearly why a modern human might find it so difficult to survive even a single day in prehistoric times. Because in this place, everything requires patience, experience, and the bond between people in a small tribe. The sky is now completely dark. Stars appear in ever-growing numbers, stretching across the night sky like tiny grains of light scattered upon a giant black canvas. The fire in the center of the camp burns steadily and warmly. The firelight casts a glow on everyone's faces, creating long, softly moving shadows on the ground. After a long day of hunting, working, and traveling, the entire tribe gathers once more around the familiar hearth. The final few pieces of today's prey are slow roasting on hot stones. The scent of wood smoke and roasted meat mingle in the cool night air. The people living in the prehistoric period may not have many of the things we consider essential in the modern world. No concrete houses, no electricity, no supermarkets or hospitals. But they have something that modern life sometimes makes us forget. They have connection, they have knowledge of nature, and they understand that to survive, every member of the tribe needs one another. The eldest of the group begins to tell a story once again. His voice is deep and slow, blending with the crackle of the fire and the sound of the river flowing behind the camp. You do not understand every word he says, but you can feel the familiar rhythm of the tale, like a memory that has been retold many times across generations. Perhaps it is a story of a great hunt, or of long migrations across strange lands, or perhaps simply a story to remind everyone that they are a part of this tribe. The children grow sleepy. They curl up in animal hides near the fire. A few adults also begin to lie down to rest after the long day. The night wind blows gently through the valley. The grass rustles. In the distance, a nocturnal beast calls out, echoing from the dark forest. But within the circle of the firelight, everything remains peaceful. You lie down on the dry grass and look up at the sky. Thousands of stars twinkle above. No city lights to obscure them. No noise of the modern world. Only the vast night sky, just as ancient humans saw it for tens of thousands of years. And in that quiet moment, you begin to ponder the question this story posed from the very beginning. Why would a modern human find it so difficult to survive even a single day in prehistoric times? The answer does not lie only in wild beasts, not only in the harsh weather, not only in hunting or finding food. The answer lies in something much simpler. The people living in prehistoric times understood their world in a way that we no longer do. They knew how to read footprints on the ground, how to hear the small sounds in the forest, knowing when to move and when to wait. These are skills learned over a lifetime, across many generations. And as you lie there by the fire of the small tribe in the ancient valley, you realize that if placed in this world alone, perhaps a modern human truly would find it very difficult to survive. But if there were time to learn, if there were a tribe to live with, if there were people willing to share their experience, perhaps we too would gradually learn how to slow down, to listen to nature, and to exist amidst this vast wild world. The fire burns lower as the night passes. The sound of the river continues its steady flow. A gentle breeze continues to blow across the grassland, and under the starlit sky of the ancient world, you gradually drift into sleep, closing the imaginary journey of a day that a modern human would likely never forget.
Sleep well.